Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast. On the first ever episode where the season has ended and we've got nothing to look forward to no more. But we're going to review the 2023 season, so we're obviously going to have a little look over the season like we did midway through the season. But obviously we've got the whole season to look at. And we're going to be looking at some various topics and also reflecting on our predictions at the start of the year. Got to make clear this episode is going to be looking at the season as a whole, not specific driver performance. We're going to go into that more in the coming weeks. So we're just going to be looking at the season as a whole more than any drivers or teams in particular. So like we did for the mid-season review, we have got some kind of moments of the season, some stuff that stand out, and as there's more to look at, we've gone for 3. So I'll kick off with one of mine. Let's go for Devon DiFrancesco at the Indy GP. A moment which really came out of nowhere. He qualified 5th, which was pretty remarkable enough. And then even on the run to turn 1, he came out of nowhere, was lounging in 5th, and then just went around the outside of everyone to take the lead. And although he didn't last for very long, it was quite an incredible moment considering how DiFrancesco has been nowhere near that 4th position. For him to take the lead with that remarkable move was one of the most surprising moments I think I've seen in IndyCar. We've seen a lot in our time.
I mean, that's probably the best moment of his IndyCar career, and
easily.
You know, I've even read stuff saying that performance alone kind of, you know, got teams talking. You know, with DiFrancesco obviously not returning to Andretti, a lot of teams that don't have their lineup sorted yet, and just that weekend alone showed that maybe when he does have the right equipment, DiFrancesco can be fast and can be a really bold racing driver, because that was arguably the best move of the year. It's a very intelligent move, actually, the fact that he decided to drop back a little bit just to open up that space where he could just send it around the outside and proper elbows out. It was gutsy. And yeah, that came after a really strong qualifying as well. So for DiFrancesco, that's a moment he can hang on to from his time at Andretti, which has sort of overall been disappointing. But yeah, I can't argue with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say that live performance as well was one that kind of just made me realize how good he could be as well. Because you haven't seen it all through the season. He's not had the best luck, and he's not been running that good. So just to kind of see that, it just kind of shows that sometimes it's not the driver, and sometimes it could be the car. And yeah,
I just think the best bit about it all, it was just so incredibly random. It wasn't like it was a new track or there's been chaos further down the field. There was drivers up front like Gray Rahal, Pato O'Ward, Christian Lingard. There were established drivers in front of him, and he just absolutely schooled them outside on the outside of the corner. And it's just so incredibly random, which I think just made it so great.
I mean, that was a bizarre race weekend as well, because it was one of those where, well, obviously Dixon produced the unthinkable to win. However, Marcus Armstrong, I think, was the fastest Ganassi car in qualifying. Palou also made it into the Fast 12, but you had Dixon, Ericsson having poor qualifyings, Newgarden starting down near the back. It was one of the wilder weekends of the season, actually, and I think DiFrancesco being at the heart of the action, obviously not bringing back a great finish in the end, but that kind of embodied what a bizarre race weekend it was.
Yeah, very odd, very odd. Right, someone else, throw another one out there. The best moments of the season.
So my 3 moments really all link back to the Indy 500 in some way or another. My first one is part of that month of May fortnight, and that is Bump Day. Jack Harvey's lap in particular, his 4 laps, especially the fact that, you know, he just pulled it out the bag and went faster on one of his laps. I think was it his second or third, maybe his third lap.
His third lap.
Made some heroic adjustment, and then went faster. It was incredible, because it was the last gasp. It was kind of just a desperate, attempt to get in the race. He looked out of it. You know, they spend so much time in qualifying waiting for the cars to cool down, but from one run, which was unsuccessful as he tried to leapfrog Graham Rahal, just went straight out for another. It was that or nothing. It was sudden death. Rahal wouldn't even have a chance to respond, and yeah, Harvey pulled it out of the bag with one of the more remarkable moments in his IndyCar career, which, you know, in terms of at least Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, and we don't know what the future is going to hold for Harvey, but it could be the end of his IndyCar career, but he at least has that moment to take away, and really was iconic, and it just showed why Bump Day is so valuable, and having more than 33 cars trying to qualify for the 500 is so valuable. But yeah, kudos to Jack Harvey for that. Still quite amazed by it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought it up actually, because once in a while I watch some highlights, and I think that's probably the one that always comes to mind to watch as one of the first ones, just because there was such an underdog story almost. Jack Harvey, whose IndyCar career, let's not forget, was already on the ropes at this point. Now, there wasn't anything to say if he didn't qualify; he would have been replaced at that point there. And then, obviously, the second of his 3 runs was unsuccessful, and you've got this overheating engine and running out of tyres, and Jack Harvey just makes that one adjustment, which just brings back all the speed and knocks his boss out the Indy 500. Obviously, Rahal made it back in the end, which, dare I say, almost took some of the magic away later on, but it was just sort of the moment, and we're getting so many of these iconic Bump Day moments. Also, that was Carl Kaiser knocking Fernando Alonso out of the Indy 500 a couple of years ago. Simona Di Silvestro qualifying for the Indy 500 just a couple of years ago. We're just getting more of these magical stories, and Bump Day is such a great story for the underdog. The underdog versus the Goliath, and Jack Harvey was just another great case of it.
The drama was just... Oh, the commentary added to it.
Yeah.
Really, it just... That's how sport is, and it's, one of those moments that I think for years and years to come we'll be rewatching and just marveling at, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
My moment goes kind of off the back of Bump Day. So I put Graham Rahal, how he got bumped from the Indy 500 to then, like a few months later, get pole back at the Indy GP. I just like following kind of like the distraught feelings and how the emotions were high on Bump Day, to kind of not have to relive it, and to kind of just replace the not good memories with with just a better memory. It's just it's that's just
Yeah, I mean, that is my second moment of the season, actually, was Graham Rahal taking pole at the Indy GP or the Gallagher Grand Prix, and then obviously backing that up again with another pole at Portland. And I suppose more generally, you can kind of just say the moment being Rahal Letterman Lanigan's resurgence, really, after, just the lowest of lows, and sat on the edge of his car in tears after being bumped from the 500 with his kids there. It was a heartbreaking sight, really. But to then come back a few months later, and just maybe not put the demons to bed, because it will haunt him until the next 500 where he will hopefully qualify. But on the grounds of where he had that dismal moment, to then, people were writing him off. People were saying he's old, he's never going to be fast again, he can't keep up with these young guys, Christian Lundgaard being his teammate. But then to go and put it on pole at Indianapolis, of all places, and then go and do it again at Portland to prove it was just no fluke. I think it's just a remarkable story, and maybe it's more apt to say it's the story of the season than the moment of the season. But yeah, Graham Rahal, just astonishing, really. The mentality, the resilience from the whole team, really, but him in particular, with all of the the negativity and the knock to his confidence it must have been to have been bumped out of the race. Fair play to him. Well done.
Yeah, so that was actually on my list as well, but I put full just in case this has happened. So that was on there for me as well. I just think Rahal's... It must have been so easy to get so dejected, just to throw the towel in, and Rahal persevered, and it was made clear that Christian Lundgaard is top dog at the team this year, but Rahal was still pulling his results out the bag, and as you said, 2 poles in the final 4 races of the year. So unfortunate not to win the Indy GP, because he drove fantastically. Even Portland, he was pretty unfortunate with the strategy in the end. But it's just I think what made it better was the same place where it all in May his career almost came crashing down. They kind of put it back up in August at Indianapolis, winning pole in almost exactly the same spot as the one he found himself dejected on the side of his car, crying his eyes out that he'd missed out on the Indy 500. And for that kind of turnaround to happen so soon, it was just a magical moment, and it kind of, as you said, silenced the doubters to some extent. And with Graham Rahals, yeah, I've still got it. I can still compete at the front. And as you said, first pole in 6 years was pretty remarkable. And who's to say next year you can't get one better? I'll chuck out another moment. We'll go right back to the start of the season. Let's go to Texas, where the final few laps, I think, were some of the best racing we've seen in years, particularly on oval. You had Pato O'Ward, Joseph Newgarden, Alex Palou, David Malukas, even people like Colton Herter were in the mix as well. The final sort of 30 laps or so were just absolutely sensational. You had cars side by side for multiple laps. We did not know who was going to win right until the final lap, which unfortunately we didn't get. But it was just sensational racing at Texas, and kind of really put the demand back for high-speed oval action.
Yeah, I mean, we might get onto Texas a little bit more actually when it comes to speaking about our races of the season. But yeah, it was just remarkable, really. It was kind of a display of pack racing, and there were so many different sort of grooves open for the drivers. They could go up high, go down low, and not really be affected too much. It was some really, really spectacular racing, and as you said, it was such a shame we couldn't go right to the flag with Grosjean crashing, because it looked like we were going to have a repeat or similar to the year before, where Newgarden pit McLaughlin at the line when it was Newgarden and O'Ward fighting at the front this year. But yeah, incredible moment. Sort of, the climax of that race.
It all just felt like a massive build-up towards the final lap, and it was just a guessing game because the race itself was really bizarre. Because if you remember, sort of had Rosenqvist, Dixon, the McLarens in there as well, and Joseph Newgarden in sort of the early phases. And then Pato O'Ward just started lapping the entire field. There was the point where him and Newgarden were the only one on the lead lap. And then I think it was Rosenqvist actually who started O'Ward's downfall in the race, where he got sent back while everyone else was unlapped. And then we just got some of the best racing I've seen in years, certainly on Texas. And I think the thing that made it so great is how poor Texas has been for racing the last few years, where they installed the PJ1 for NASCAR racing. It's obviously been terrible for IndyCar racing, and there has been absolutely no grip anywhere other than the low line. And just the way that it kind of came out with a huge bang, where you had drivers free abreast at points, was just really, really refreshing, and just such a shame that we couldn't get the final lap, because the 30 laps before that were just incredible. You could take your eyes off it.
I think some of the best races, though, are the ones that you don't know who's going to win. Like, I feel like as soon as you can, like, there's some races where Palou's can maybe like pull ahead, and you're like, okay, that's it. So then you have to focus on little areas. But then when you don't know who's going for the lead, it just makes it, watching it, just so more enjoyable. And it kind of, I feel like the anticipation of it all, it's just, I don't know, like towards the end, it's you're more like alert of what's happening, and you're more like on the edge of your seat, and I feel like you watch it more, and you just notice all like the little, would you say, like little details and just everything that's happening. Mine links again to Indy 500 kind of. I don't know if that's what yours have, but anyways, I put that one of the moments was when Joseph Newgarden, he kind of went into the stands after his win, and you know how he planned that throughout the beginning. He was like, "Oh, if I'm going to win, this is what I'm going to do," and it's so like unpredictable. That doesn't really happen, and to kind of, for the fans to also experience the joy and all the excitement of that win with the driver as well, not just being like further away. I feel like that is it's really special to kind of see, and because it doesn't happen as much, it just makes kind of everything. It makes it feel, I don't want to say like pure, but it makes it just more. You just know that everything that he's like doing and the emotions that he's feeling is like actually it.
Yeah, I think the Indy 500 probably is going to. It's always the moment of the season, however you look at it. Whatever year it is, it's always going to be a stand-up moment. It's always going to be the one people remember in 10 years' time. And Newgarden's sort of prior planning of it all really just added something a bit extra. The way he knew the specific gates to go into, the place he knew to park the car if he won. And Newgarden deserves so much credit because he drove so incredibly well. It must have been so easy to lose your head. You know, you had major contenders falling away, whether that was Pelot, whether that was Dixon, whether that was O'Ward. And he just kept his head calm. You know, it was very clear Penske would knock fast in qualifying, and he just kept it very Joseph Newgarden. He just kept it consistent and just waited for his opportunity. And it was so refreshing to see that win finally coming because it was long overdue. And I think the celebration made it even more emotional. You know, it's almost up there with the Helio fence climb over the years, and even watching it now, it still almost gives you goosebumps. The whole moment, the whole scene, and kind of the final tick box in Newgarden's career.
Yeah, I mean, I also had that as a moment. I think more generally, just Newgarden winning the Indy 500 was probably my moment of the season, actually. I think, yeah, the celebration was iconic. That was probably the best moment within sort of the more general moment of him finally winning the 500. But yeah, it just feels like such a huge accomplishment for him, and it's as I said a lot of the time, kind of just legacy defining for him. You know, he's up there with the great drivers, but if he didn't win the 500, then maybe he'd be talked about sort of a rung below them. But to win the 500 and do it in such impressive fashion, because it hadn't been, the best month in terms of outright speed, qualified, very averagely, right in the middle of the pack, but just seamlessly really made his way through the field and, navigated all of the late restarts so well, and to make that decisive late pass on Ericsson to win and to finally win, and then the release of emotion over the radio. Of course, the celebration, embracing his team, embracing his wife. It's just such an incredible moment. And yeah, I'd like to relive it as someone who, is quite a big fan of Newgarden. It was incredible, really. So yeah, I think just for the fact that it is such a defining moment in his career, I think for me that is the moment of the season.
I think whoever you support, you can't not see that as the final lap, as the moment of the season. Whoever you support, because it's just every year the final laps of the Indy 500 are just such magical moments, and seeing the raw emotion of drivers after winning a race like that is almost just really refreshing. It shows how much they care, how much it does mean to them. Kind of seeing the whole celebrations and that's in the immediate post-race events is always such a magical moment to see.
I think as well, beyond the 500, you can more generally speak about one of the storylines of the season being Newgarden's oval form as well, to so nearly sweep the season, to win, 4 on the bounce in the season. Obviously, is it 6 on the bounce? Oh no, 5 on the bounce. Obviously, because of the mechanical failure in Iowa last year, it could have been a run even greater. But yeah, I think his oval form in general was just something to really marvel at. It was just remarkable. Like, it's just absolutely breathtaking that he was doing it on the super speedways, and you get to Iowa and he's just weaving through traffic like it's not even there. Sweeps that weekend. It felt like redemption after the mechanical failure of 2022. So yeah, we'll obviously speak more about Newgarden when we kind of review all of the drivers' seasons in future episodes. But for Newgarden, it was a weird season, but on ovals, just simply remarkable history-making season, really.
Yeah, it was almost a shame that we didn't quite get it done a worldwide technology race day. But as you said, that was 5 in a row. Would have been 7 in a row if we went for the Iowa mechanical incident last year. And it's something almost so unprecedented just to see a driver perform a racetrack so dominantly. We've never seen someone so accomplished in a type of track before. And I think Iowa summed it up brilliantly. We've never really had a case in IndyCar where someone's so expectant to win over a weekend. But from the word go, it always seemed like Newgarden was going to win somehow, and you're right. And it just kind of proved how incredible Newgarden is by the fact that he just dominated that weekend so effectively. I'm going to throw another moment out there. This one's a bit of a different one, but it's a really bizarre storyline we got over the season, which is that really odd McLaughlin-Grosjean rivalry. It obviously started off in St. Petersburg, which I think that itself is the main moment, you know. They were battling all race long, and it looked like something would finally fall, and McLaughlin came out of the pits about a metre ahead, and then obviously them colliding at turn 3, and that kind of led to a little rivalry which carried on, obviously in Alabama when they were fighting for the win, and then later on in Detroit where they collided again. But it was just so like incredibly random, and I think obviously, as I said, the main moment was St. Petersburg, and it was such a great way to start the season with all the drama kicking off, with rivalry starting, and it kind of set the tone for what was going to be another fantastic season.
Yeah, I mean, they always seemed on good terms, and even after St. Pete, they were kind of, you know, McLaughlin apologised, and it kind of seemed all good. But then I think Detroit was actually where things kind of, but just more generally between Grosjean and the entire Penske team, who all seem to have some sort of contact with him. And I remember McLaughlin liking a tweet after Detroit, someone asking if his patience was wearing thin with Grosjean, and he liked, presumably in agreement. But yeah, that St. Pete really did set the tone. I mean, that battle, it's such a shame that, you know, it didn't go down to the death, and it did end in calamity in the end, because, you know, it was remarkable. But yeah, it was a very strange sort of, there were quite a lot of instances where they just kind of appeared to kind of just be brought together as though like magnets, really.
Yeah, and then you got Alabama a couple of weeks after, and although they didn't make contact, they were getting a bit argy-bargy, and I think Grosjean made quite an aggressive move into the final corner, and then when they're battling for the lead, McLaughlin muscled his way past that time, and maybe there was no love lost from St. Petersburg as shown in that interaction. As you said, he didn't fall out, didn't make best friends with the Penskes, as proved particularly after the race at Detroit, as I mentioned last week, with Will Power's absolutely fantastic outburst at Grosjean for his little skirmish in practice. So he really did not make the best of friends this year, did Romain Grosjean. And let's look it back from that little interview. Will Power Road America just has to be on here because we said it last week. Just excellent interview. Blasting Road America, blasting Grosjean, blasting Dixon, IndyCar at its very, very finest.
It kind of just proved what a spectacle IndyCar is, not just on track, but off track. None of this PR sort of drivers almost a bit robotic, you know, knowing exactly what to say. Absolutely not, especially with Will Power. I mean, he just doesn't have a filter, and you love that, really. You love that the drivers are able to say what they're thinking. I mean, obviously emotions were running high, but he was fuming at the track when you go off, which, you know, you're not really supposed to go off. So I'm not sure if he considered that the fact it was so rough when you did go off might have been more of a deterrent than anything. But yeah, then obviously Grosjean caught strays. After that, deserved a punch in the face. I mean, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Will Power continues to deliver.
I was going to say, I think it's just always funny when, you know, he's when something's always happened and then he's interviewed afterwards, because it's not, like you said, it's just not filtered, and I feel like that's kind of, it's not what you see in like other things, and I feel like just seeing that and kind of, I don't know, just seeing how that he's speaking, that you know that he's saying some sort of truth and he's speaking from like how he feels, it just makes you like him just so much more.
Well, there was also Nashville where he forgot his earplugs, which we had a bit of an interesting interview, and then we had Gateway. What did he call McLaughlin? Did he call him an idiot or something? Can't realise it was McLaughlin. So
that was fantastic. That was a brilliant moment.
There was multiple occasions of power just bursting out on live TV, so it wasn't exactly a one-off. It did happen multiple times, and kind of links back to Detroit 21 might be up there as well when his car broke down after the restart, and he just started blasting IndyCar, started blasting the cars. Willpower angry is just... You wouldn't get it in any other sport where they... Well, maybe NASCAR you would, but you wouldn't get it in any other sport where you just interview a driver when they're filled with pure rage. And because of that, you just get these excellent moments. Right, let's get on to some of the surprises of the year. I'll let someone else go first this time.
So for me, and I do hope you guys haven't also gone down this route, because I think it is kind of a real standout surprise. Agustin Canapino. I mean, there were kind of no real expectations of him. He came in as an unknown with a stock car, touring car background in Argentina. Obviously an absolute hero over there. I mean, he's won awards that the likes of Lionel Messi have won for being such a sort of esteemed sportsman in the country. But yeah, no open wheel, single seater background, yet comes into IndyCar and really blows everyone away. He finished 12th in his opening 2 races. Obviously, St. Pete was a bit of a chaos-filled race, and 12th wasn't exactly fantastic. I think he was quite far adrift of the field in terms of those who finished on the lead lap. But then to finish 12th in Texas in his opening oval race was just remarkable, really. He's got no experience of even driving an open-wheel car. To go onto an oval, which is just something completely different, to one of the most difficult tracks by all accounts, and pull out a 12th place finish is really remarkable. I mean, even qualified 19th for that, which, that is very impressive in a 28 car field in terms of ovals. But yeah, he really shocked the odds. I mean, he was occasionally competitive with Callum Ilott, who is obviously, especially in the junior ranks, and even since he's come to IndyCar, shown to be a real talent. But in the look at Rookie of the Year, he beat the 2 drivers, racing for relatively similar level teams that actually had experience of racing in America with the Road to Indy, and really quite emphatically beat them in the Rookie of the Year championship. And yeah, I guess it really just speaks to his skill that he adapted to such a different discipline of racing so quickly and didn't really make mistakes that, you saw other rookies, particularly Benjamin Pedersen and Stingray Robb, making. I mean, he had a little incident during the month of May, but managed to save that in quite remarkable fashion. And I think it's important to speak about the Indy 500 as well, really. Yes, the race didn't go as he wanted, but he was always competitive. He never looked like he was going to get bumped, which was a fear when you're a driver who is competing in such a massive event for the first time with no experience of anything remotely similar. But yeah, by the end of the season, I know there was a bit of a sour note that it ended on with contact with his teammate Callum Ilott, and his fans have since been on the back of Ilott, and that's not been too pleasant. But yeah, even looking at the season finale in Laguna Seca, that was probably Canapino's strongest weekend. He looked at one stage as though he could be a contender for the win or at least a podium. Yes, it was a race with a fair amount of chaos, but he had kept himself relatively clean until the latter stages, which some dropped down. But yeah, to finish 21st in the championship in his first season, it's a respectable effort, and there's a lot to build on next year if indeed he is kept on.
I think again it's the storyline. You've got this guy who no one in America has heard of before, who's come from the background of Argentine touring cars, which, let's face it, not many people can say they're experts in Argentine touring cars, to a 33-year-old who's never driven a single seater and hasn't spoken a word of English in his life. And I think that's actually we've got to give a lot of credit to that, because I think it was maybe quite early on in the season, but Canapino, I said in the channel, he's just spawned in learning fluent English, because he adapted to that so quickly. Not only was it the language, the nature of the place he's moving to, but as well on track. As you said, he started the season off brilliantly, and there's so many more moments. Canapino, let's face it, he didn't have the best of luck at times. Detroit, he made a slight mistake, which dropped him out of the top 10 contention. Iowa, I think he ran up a bit high, which lost him a couple of positions. He said he had the pace for top 5 that weekend, and even Gateway as well. He was running quite strongly until he had some issue in the pits of some kind. So all 4 oval events, Canapino has shown something this year, which is really impressive and really strong building blocks to go from. And I think Road America is the best example. He proved he can fight for a podium on merit. So I'm really excited to see what Canapino could do next year with years' experience under the belt, and hopefully he can iron out these small issues he's had here and there, and he'll be really towards the front on a more regular basis, because he's a very refreshing driver to see. He's very humble, and he always just looks like he's having a great time, which I think is really good to see.
It was incredible, really, seeing him fight against some of the series' esteemed names. I mean, you speak about Detroit. I remember him battling with Herta and trying to pass Herta, which was, that's quite something in your rookie year, having never done anything of the like. But yeah, just on every type of track, really, he, especially by the end of the season, but even earlier, he adapted really quickly and was able to perform, whether it be road courses, street courses, or, as we've spoken about, ovals.
I'm going to throw another surprise out there, and I'm going to say it's going to be Linus Lundqvist. He didn't get a seat this year, which was a bit of a shame, because he absolutely deserved one. Simon Pagenaud, obviously, unfortunately, got injured, and that eventually gave Lundqvist his long-awaited chance, and he came out and was maybe Meyer Shank's best performer of the season in his 3 races. He got 2 fastest laps in 3 races. I think he qualified for the fast 12. Definitely on his debut, might have done it again. And he just looked so comfortable so quickly, and he proved to be a really nice guy. And again, a bit like Canapino, he just seemed to be enjoying the experience, and he really latched onto the opportunity, which thankfully has provided him a really good full-time seat next year.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly had a point to prove, but some drivers could, feel really under pressure with having a point to prove, and Lundqvist just didn't. He relished it, and coming into Nashville, I mean, you kind of felt it was, whatever happened, he wasn't really going to be judged because it's a tricky track. There's usually a lot of chaos. Yes, he did crash out in the end, but you're looking at his 1-lap speed, and he did 1 race on every type of track. Started 11th in Nashville, 12th on the Indy Road course, 12th in Gateway. I can't recall if there are any penalties that boosted him up the grid there, but yeah, they were his starting positions for his 3 races, which is just remarkable, really. I mean, he will have been no doubt frustrated to have been out of a car this year. He deserved to be on the grid, having won Indy Lights in its final iteration with that name. But yeah, to come in and just be so quickly on the pace, and really just having the measure of his teammate for a lot of it. Even looking at his first weekend in Nashville, I think he was constantly ahead of Castro Neves. It was, really impressive, especially when you look at, yes, Tom Blomqvist isn't coming from a background where he's driven single-seaters for quite a while. Formula E was the last time he's had the last few years in sports cars, but he was kind of quite off the pace whenever he jumped in. Yeah, Toronto was decent, but he still took his time to get going in practice. For Lundqvist, he was right on the pace as soon as, right at the get-go, even in practice in Nashville. So, yeah, he deserves to be on the grid next year, and it speaks to the job he did that it's Ganassi that have picked him up.
Yeah. Ellie, your surprise of the season?
I didn't know if this was going to go into this category or like the next one, but it was kind of like off the bank of that. It was just going to be that the surprise was the Simon Pagenaud to crash in, is it practice or qualifying? It just, I feel like no one, practice. I just feel like no one kind of expected it, and no one kind of like saw it coming, and to kind of to have that big of a crash as well was really like kind of like scary to see. And even after it, I feel like no one kind of expects him to be gone that long. I feel like people are kind of like expect him to be back a bit sooner, but obviously he didn't. But then that led to the people filling in for his seats. But yeah, it was just, I feel like that was like a surprise. No one kind of saw it coming, and obviously to kind of for a driver to crash out mid-season, and then from that to, as a result of that, shall I say, not be able to like compete in the rest of the races. I just feel like no one kind of sees that coming, but especially this one.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a pleasant situation. I mean, you thought, okay, he'll miss the Mid-Ohio weekend. He'll be fine. He'll recover quickly, be back in the car in no time. But yeah, as the weeks kind of went on, it grew a bit more concerning. I think, I really hope for his sake, and I know we've said this a lot. He manages to get back in a car somewhere, hopefully on the IndyCar grid at some point, because that's not how you want things to end. But we saw it with Kurt Busch in NASCAR. He's had to retire now because of a similar incident where he had concussion. And at the end of the day, racing's only one part of his life, and you've got to be careful. And I think it's credit to IndyCar that their sort of concussion protocols have been so strict, because Simon said he was fine and he was feeling fine even in the immediate aftermath of the crash, but clearly feeling fine and being fit to race and being fine to race, just it's another thing. So that was probably one of the worst moments of the season, really.
I think now, if you look at the other side of it, again, you've got to give testament to the safety of modern day Indy cars. He rolled 7-8 times at rapid speed, and for him to be able to walk out by himself was a pretty remarkable sight to see. And it's a shame we didn't see Pagenaud coming back, but it was testament to how strong Indy cars are and what great job safety advancements have been made in recent years. Let's move on to some of the disappointments. Someone throw one out there.
It's sad because obviously we're a British-based podcast, and we like Jack Harvey, but unfortunately Jack Harvey is the disappointment of the season. I personally felt coming into the season that it couldn't get much worse than it was last year. Felt that would probably be an outlier. After all, he came into RLL having finished 12th in the championship for Maya Shank, which is an outstanding result, really. But he leaves RLL before the end of the season because they are, so desperate to get into the leader circle. Yes, gets replaced by Daly on the oval. That's understandable. But then Yuri Vips, a rookie, is put in the car, and unfortunately for Harvey, does a much better job. And yes, Vips maybe didn't get the finishes that he would have liked for various bits of either misfortune or simply not just being race fit for Portland, having been out of a car all year. But Vips showed real pace, and yes, Harvey had the occasional strong qualifying on road courses where the team grew really strong. However, even then, he was still really adrift of his teammates. And I really feel for Harvey. I feel like it's more of a confidence issue than something that's kind of indicative of his level as a driver, because obviously we saw at Maya Shank what his level is. I mean, he almost got a podium there, finished 4th on a couple of occasions. It's a sad story, really. I think his best finish was a 10th in Nashville last year, which that was a chaotic race. Other than that, failed to finish inside the top 10 in nearly 2 whole seasons, and especially when you consider the package that RLL had on road courses and to some extent street courses towards the end of this year, you would have expected much better. But I really hope there is a future for Harvey, because, as I said, I'm a big fan of him, and he clearly is better than he has shown over the last couple of years. But it's just massively disappointing, really.
It was a shame because, as you said, he's proved himself in IndyCar multiple times, and he for some reason things just didn't quite click. And Harvey didn't have the best of luck either, strategy wise or whatever. But it just it just really was a shame that he could never get going at RLL, because it was a move that really excited me, because it looked like Harvey was making a huge step up for his career, and it just, frustratingly, for whatever reason, just didn't work out. And it is a shame, because I think Jack Harvey's a good guy, and I think he probably does merit a place in the IndyCar grid. I want to see what he can do. Was RLL just one of those bizarre things? Because there's no way someone loses all their talent in a year like that. And it is just a shame, because, as we said, he's got the potential somewhere. Just for some reason, just wasn't there.
I think bizarre is a really weird, really sort of good way to put it. Really, I mean, how do you go from fighting near the front, picking up fourth places on 2 occasions in 21, to just being just kind of right from the outset with RLL off the pace? He didn't get off to a good start. He had to withdraw from the Texas race after the crash in 22. But this is a guy, and I hope people don't forget, he was a really talented young driver. I mean, yeah, 2020 was his first sort of really full season, but competed in the first 6 races in 2019, picked up a podium on the Indy road course. I mean, that was in one of his first selection of races, really. I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean, obviously we spoke about Bump Day being just an incredible moment, something for him to savour, but it's, yeah, he would rather not have been in that position, I'm sure, in the first place. And that's kind of just a story of how his RLL stint has gone.
Yeah. Ali, disappointment for you?
We've already mentioned him a couple of times on the podcast, but I have to go with Roman Grosjean, just because I feel like at the beginning, obviously the first 2 races were alright, but then in Long Beach and then in, is it Alabama? Is that the one afterwards?
Yeah.
He did really well, and I feel like that kind of, from that, it kind of led to people, or at least I was thinking that he was going to do kind of better throughout the season. And then I feel like the next couple of races following that, he didn't really do that well. You know, he had his instances that where he was crashing and going off and having contact, and just always kind of in the middle of something, whether it was like him and McLaughlin or him and Power. It's just, I feel like at the beginning of this, I kind of expected more from him. But in terms of like results wise, he did the same as last year. You know, in the championship, he's 13th this year. I'm pretty sure he was 13th last year. But just I feel like it was just he. I feel like I just expected more at the beginning, and he kind of disappointed on that.
Whatever way you look at it, it's been a barren run for Grosjean. 3 top 10 finishes all year, and there was only 1 in the last 13 races. And I think maybe what the biggest disappointment is how well he started the season, because he could have well won St. Petersburg if some from the McLaughlin contact, because he was running top 5 in Texas until he crashed at 2 laps to go. Yes, that one's on him, but he proved he had the pace all race, and then followed by the consecutive runner-up spots in Long Beach and Barber. And then just after that, it was just filled with incidents. Crashed out Indy 500. He crashed out in Detroit. Road America, he was off the road every time the camera panned to him. Mid Ohio, he had some offs. Toronto, he crashed. Portland, okay, that wasn't completely his fault, but he got into a bit of contact there. I think, as I said, the biggest disappointment is he started the season so well, and people were like, "Oh, hang on, maybe he's a championship contender here," and it just went so badly wrong so very quickly. And for someone who's proved, similar to Harvey, he's proved what he can do in IndyCar. He almost seems so much stronger at Coyne than he was at Andretti. And it just has not worked out, which is a real shame, because as I said a couple of weeks ago, people wanted to see Grosjean succeed, but I think the constant outbursts at the team and just his own silly mistakes just really cost him.
Yeah, I mean, I remember speaking quite in depth about him in the mid-season review and saying I almost felt at that stage it was harsh to say he was the disappointment of the season. I think that's what I said at the time. But like you've said, Dan, it's kind of just because the pace has been there. He's often qualified well, 2 pole positions in the opening 4 races. Third in Long Beach, third in Detroit in qualifying. 2 sixth places in Nashville, Gallagher Grand Prix, 5th at Gateway. But then it gets to the races, and it's just really, really odd what happened. He went through that just horrendous spell where he was crashing more or less every single week, having some sort of incident. And I did feel for him because racing is such a it's such a confidence-based sport, and he was clearly in his own head at times, but at the same time, I don't think he was helping himself with his conduct, as we've spoken about. It seems that everything was not all right in terms of there's quite a lot of discontent in the team with the way he would kind of blame them for things and get unhappy and not take accountability. And things kind of just spiraled, and we had so much hope coming into the year, and the start of the year gave so much hope. He could easily have won in St. Pete if it wasn't for the incident with McLaughlin, which was not Grosjean's fault. But the way it kind of just petered out, and you're looking at that spell, Indy 500 finishing in the wall, and all the way through to Toronto. Really, I think Road America was the one that was just really poor. Every time you saw him, he was off the track, it felt. And it's just been, the potential is there, and the potential has been there all season. And we saw it obviously in his debut year with Coyne, but he just can't quite seem to pull it together for whatever reason.
I think that's the most annoying part as well, is that you can see that he can do it, and you can see that he has potential, but then he's not kind of following through, and also not taking accountability. Like you said, there's multiple times where I said the wheel just slipped out of his hand or something.
That was a bizarre one.
Weird. And then first time it's like maybe it could have happened somehow, but then the second time it's surely that can't have happened, so maybe it's something like internal that I don't know. It's just bizarre that happened, and that it happened twice.
And as Archie said, it is a confidence-based sport, and maybe Grosjean saying it was the will maybe gives him a bit more confidence to say, oh, maybe it wasn't my fault, if he truly does believe that. But it was just never his fault for whatever reason. Even Portland qualifying, at the end of the day, he was when he did the lap, and he just had that bizarre outburst at the team, knowing he was on live television. And it's not been a one-off thing. He's done that multiple times as well. It's just like Grosjean hasn't learned from his mistakes, which I think that stubbornness really affected him, and maybe that's why the results weren't there. Because yes, as a whole, Andretti's results haven't been great, but Herta and Kirkwood have still been significantly better, and I think Grosjean's attitude really let him down at times. I'm going to throw mine out there. The title Defense of Willpower, I think, was quite a major disappointment. The storyline of the last year was this revitalised Willpower, this much calmer Willpower who gets results week in, week out, and it just really wasn't reflected this year. He really lacked consistency at multiple times this season. He obviously went winless for the entirety of the season, and all round he just felt very anonymous. Yes, we had these brilliantly entertaining moments off track, but on track it just felt like he was pretty much nowhere all year. He ended up with 4 podiums, which I think we said this the other week, was actually much more than we were expecting, because he has just been so anonymous at times, and it just didn't reflect on how well he drove last season compared to this season.
Yeah, I mean, firstly I will say, I do agree. I think in terms of a title defense, it's been very disappointing, but the picture, as we have kind of learned, is kind of goes a bit wider for Power this year, and it might show why sometimes he did seem a bit on edge. I think there've been quite a lot of issues off track. His wife had some quite serious health issues, and I think it got to the stage where there were times where he didn't even know if he'd be able to race because things were getting so bad. And thankfully, they've improved. And I think maybe with that considered, his year, has been a decent enough one. Obviously, it's nowhere near where it was, last year. But yeah, Will Power's year is a hard one to judge just because there are these external factors that clearly sort of played a part. And when you look at some of the things he did manage to achieve with that taken into account, I guess you can maybe give him credit, picking up some podiums, picking up the double pole at Iowa, which was mighty impressive. I think other drivers have spoken about the fact that they are just mesmerized by what Will Power does in qualifying. And I don't know what it is he does, and I don't think some of the drivers even know, but he can constantly pull that out. I mean, he took the double pole last year there as well, obviously. So yeah, disappointing title defense. I think so long as everything kind of calms down and is okay off track next year, then maybe that's a better year to judge Power in terms of seeing where his mindset's at and whether he can sort of reach this approach he was in 22 again. Because that didn't quite repeat itself this year. He kind of felt like there were a few too many times where he just got slightly too annoyed and kind of lost his head a little bit. But yeah, I think it's been quite a tumultuous year for him.
Yeah, and it was disappointing he did go winless because there were times he looked pretty strong. Detroit, he was running pretty well at Alabama as well. He was in the mix, and even Iowa. Just Newgarden was just a league apart that weekend. And first winless years at 2006. End of the day, he's not the only one who had a frustratingly winless year. Colton Herta, Pato O'Ward, Alexander Rossi. He isn't the only one, but it's just a shame that this new Will Power we saw last year just wasn't reflected as strongly as it was this year.
I feel like also there was a lot of people towards the beginning that you thought was gonna be more in the championship fight, and then some of them fizzled out towards the end a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in Power's case, the season never really got going, which I think was the issue. What he did so well last season is he would just get a run of form, but that run of form never really started this year, which I think was maybe the biggest issue. Right, let's go to our last topic. Look at this year, race of the year. I feel like we might have all gone Texas here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we kind of spoke about it earlier, didn't we? But that was just a remarkable race. I think this is what I put last time, and it just wasn't beaten. I mean, we had some good races. The racing is sort of week in, week out, race in, race out, remarkable in this series. The just bewildering amount of passes, always in the hundreds. You get to Iowa and it's about 1,500 in a race. But yeah, Texas was just incredible, really, with the several lanes that were operative, and kind of it did make for, in those closing stages, as we said, almost a pack race. It was some of the best racing we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I don't think we'll touch on it too much, as we did speak about it quite lengthy earlier, but I think it was almost the reintroduction of pack racing. It wasn't quite pack racing as it was 10 years ago, but it was the closest thing we've seen, and just edge of the seat entertainment, which was so great about it. And as I said, it was just so unexpected after how bad Texas has been in recent years. We come out with a attention-grasping race, literally the entire 248 laps. And I think now Texas is one I'm really looking forward to next year, whilst it wasn't particularly before. I think last 2 years it's proven itself to be one to watch right until the checker flag falls. The racing, it's just hard to fathom unless you watch the highlights, because there were drivers 3 wide at times. There were some bold moves going on. Alex Palou made one, I think Pato O'Ward made one. And it was just IndyCar is very, very, very finest. The next thing to do is we've made predictions over the course of the season. So the first thing we're going to do is go back to our mid-season predictions. We touched on 3 different topics, so we're going to go over them. So the first one we'll go over is pretty binary, non-binary. Race winners race winners. So, the predictions were as follows. Everyone, please test luck with tally. We all said Alex Palou. I think that was a fairly safe bet, and he obviously won. I think Mid-Ohio and Portland. I can't remember when the summer break was. I think it was between Road America and Mid-Ohio. So he won in Mid-Ohio and Portland. I think that was a fairly safe bet, but it all worked pretty well for us all. Joseph Newgarden, again, very safe bet. He won both Iowa races, so well done everyone. That's 2 out of 2.
Round of applause.
Round of applause to the DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast. Now, don't get too excited because it gets a lot worse from here on in. We all said Scott McLaughlin. He got close. He got very close at Nashville. He got close at Laguna. He got close at Iowa. 3 second places. But he just didn't get that win in the second half of the season. Don't get me wrong, he was much better in the second half of the season. But for whatever reason, no win.
Yeah, I mean, second half of the season for McLaughlin, I'm pretty sure you said he was your disappointment of the first half.
I did. He must have been listening.
So it was a great upturn, sort of post 500, really. I think it was top 9 in every race.
Yeah, no, really, probably, other than maybe Palou Dixon, definitely the strongest second half of the season of anyone.
Yeah, good turnaround.
Talking of Dixon, Archie, you were the only one to put Scott Dixon, and I thought that prediction was looking pretty safe until we got to Indy Road Course and he decided to win 3 of the next 4.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys, your rationale at the time, and it kind of still sort of bears truth, really, was that he isn't the outright fastest, and he isn't the outright fastest. There were times in the season where he simply was outpaced by the likes of Palou, but he is still probably the most intelligent driver and the driver that can just manage situations the best. And we saw that for pretty much all of his wins, especially the first 2, just executing some just unthinkable strategies, tyre saving, fuel saving, and then to kind of stay cool amid the chaos at Laguna as well.
Yeah, mighty impressive. And I think I've learnt my lesson. You never count out Scott Dixon. Whatever the circumstances, he proved in both Gateway and Indy GP, you can never, ever count out Scott Dixon. So that's lesson learned. Archie, talking of sensational predictions, Christian Lundgaard, what a shout that was.
Was I the only one?
You were the only one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was possibly one of the most impressive weekend performances of the year, really. Yeah,
he was dominant.
Given that RLL, they improved and they're definitely still improving on street courses and obviously brought a good package there. But it's really road courses where we saw most of their strengths. So, yeah, for Lundgaard to actually take his win on a street course, yeah, brilliant performance. And yeah, I maybe expected it to come on a road course, but yeah, I'm happy with that.
No, that was an excellent shout. Only 5 drivers actually won from that mid-season review. The other one was Carl Kirkwood, who none of us mentioned. But yeah, sensational prediction. I feel like, looking back on it now, it was fairly obvious. All the signs were there. He had strong performances in Indy GP, at Road America, at Alabama. All the signs were there, I just didn't pick up to them. But yeah, very deserved race winner, and I'm glad he did win a race. Right, let's get to the downhill bit. We all went Pato Award. I feel like at the time that was inevitability. Even now, it's pretty hard to say he didn't deserve to win a race at some point. And second half of the season, don't get me wrong, he still drove very strongly. He still got another 3 podiums after that recording. And it's just one of those things where it just didn't fall into place for him.
Yeah, you kind of feel in another world. He could have had 3 wins. He probably should have had at least 2. Obviously, the season openers, the glaring one when he had that just minor hiccup with the engine that lost him the 1 place to Ericsson that cost what was a certain win at St. Pete, really. And then Texas, if it wasn't for the late caution, he could have got Newgarden. There's no guarantees there, of course. And then the season finale as well at Laguna. I mean, maybe that was Palou's race to win, and maybe if it wasn't so chaotic, Palou would have probably won that by about a minute and lapped the entire field. But O'Ward at one stage looked like he was the guy in position to win, but he just hadn't run the Reds and had to obviously go in and fulfill that requirement. So, yeah, unfortunate Pato, but You know, obviously we'll speak about this more, but a really improved season I feel from him again.
Yeah. The one we all went for was his teammate Alexander Rossi, which I feel was all a bit left field. There were some impressive performances, getaway in Indy GP, you look towards the season, but I just don't think McLaren had the strongest package this time this year, and I think maybe next year they will have a slightly stronger package, having run 3 cars for a year. So I think maybe Alexander Rossi is a bit of interest from all of us, but he'll grab a victory next year or so, I can see.
Yeah, I mean, he only got the single podium actually all season in the end, and
but to be fair, he did get 7 or 6 top 5s, so
yeah, that's solid, but still only 1 win since 2019, so he'll be desperate to pick up another next year.
And then I'll do the 2 I got wrong. Colton Herta, I feel like going to the point where we were recording, there were signs, he'd narrowly missed out on Road America winning. Just didn't fall into place from this year for whatever reason. Bit of a shame. Also, so Will Power, we've touched on him just a minute ago, so I won't go into that too much. Only other incorrect answer was Ellie said Marcus Ericsson. There wasn't really any days for Ericsson to pick up the pieces like he usually does, I think was the issue there. So just didn't quite happen.
Yeah, I thought I went with some more like really random ones, or was that something else?
So congrats, Archie. I think you were by far away the best one. You made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 predictions, and you got 4 of them right. So that's not bad going. Over half, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah, not too bad.
Not bad at all. Well, we'll do better next year, I reckon, when we predict winners at the start of the season. Right, next non-binary one is we predicted the championship top 3. We all got Alex Palou, so congratulations. We all said Joseph Newgarden, though. Bit of a weird... I feel he just had too many issues towards the end of the season, which prevented him from getting top 3. At the end of the day, he was within 9 points of getting it. It was pretty unfortunate in Laguna, so just one of those things, I think.
Yeah, I think Newgarden probably did deserve top 3. I think you're just looking at those final few races, and it was more than anything just misfortune, really. I mean, it was the Gallagher Grand Prix on the Indy Road course.
Yeah.
Not a great qualifying. Decided to take an engine penalty then, but obviously it was just an innocent bystander of Marcus Armstrong's car just being in the middle of the track. Lost laps there, obviously. Gateway was, probably more of his fault, but at the end of the day, he was pushing to do what he could to preserve his unbeaten record on ovals this year. So that was a bit whatever. Portland was solid. He made a good recovery job after his incident in qualifying. For a 5th, took the fastest lap there as well. Laguna was another just purely unfortunate one, really. He obviously got caught up in the first corner, and then I just can't see his car having been fixed properly for him to have had that just bizarre incident when he came back out.
Another good prediction from you two. You both predicted Dixon to come third. He ended up second, but at least you got him in the right ballpark. So I've done it again. Don't count out Scott Dixon. I'm not making that mistake next year.
I think he always wins somehow.
Yeah. He always finds a way, and there's no way of his consistency. He wasn't going to finish top 3.
Especially when you think he won as well.
Yeah. And I obviously went for Pato Award. To be fair, not a terrible prediction. He was only 4 points off the top 3. I think no one could have saw McLaughlin's run a 4 coming. So, not a bad prediction. I mean, Award finished top 10 in all the races left in the season. The 3 ahead of him did that. But he kind of picked up a bit of consistency there, and it wasn't a terrible prediction. It wasn't right, but it wasn't terrible.
Yeah, I mean, even I couldn't have seen McLaughlin coming in snatching 3rd. I mean, really impressive second half of the year, as we said.
Yeah. And the last prediction we made in that episode was one to watch.
I don't remember anything about this.
We'll go for yours then. You went for Joseph Newgarden.
My rationale was probably to do with ovals.
The ovals. Where, to be fair, he almost did it. Didn't quite, but I think your rationale was probably ovals there, and he got close. Yeah,
I think if I recall correctly, I think my rationale was to do with ovals, and then because of the ovals being the nearest bet to maybe putting a bit of a challenge up to Palou, but even at that stage, Palou had like a massive lead, and that was after Road America midway point of the season. So yeah, even at that stage, we were looking at where can Newgarden make up the points, and the ovals were kind of the only thing we could think of. And
and then Palou won Mid-Ohio the race afterwards, which puts even more jeopardy.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, Newgarden. I love the Iowa doubleheader. I must get that in there. It's a good weekend, and I think just watching Newgarden this year at Iowa, it was like watching greatness unfold, really.
Ellie, you went for Scott Dixon, which good one to watch. Much better second half of the season, so good prediction there.
I'm actually proud of myself for that. I feel like he was one to watch, especially because like it was just he'd do well in situations that you wouldn't think he would. Like, you know, when it was like fuel saving or like strategy, you'd be like, oh yeah, he's not gonna be able to do it. It's fine, and then he'd go and do it, and it just blows my mind.
Yeah. I don't think mine was terrible either. I actually went for someone we haven't mentioned for the entirety of this episode. David Malukas is the guy I went for. And I think post second half of the season, he was pretty good. You know, he got 6th for the race preceding in Mid-Ohio, which I think was his best on a road and street course. He got 8th in Iowa race 2. He was running top 10 in Nashville until his bizarre failure. Got another podium at Gateway, and he came 8th in Portland. I think my thesis was, how would he perform when the big teams are looking at a signature? He obviously got that going to McLaren, and I think Malukas had a very good second half of the year. So I think I made at least one good prediction this episode.
That was actually a really good shout, because I think when it came to when we were recording that, I think we recorded post Road America, didn't we?
Yes, correct.
And he was just on a string of not finishing races, basically, and it looked, it was a bleak start to the season. Obviously, Texas was strong, but other than that, it had been really disappointing. But then to come out the next race, finish 6th in Mid-Ohio, prediction vindicated straight away.
Yeah, I'm proud of myself for that one. Now, one thing we actually haven't mentioned this entire podcast is right at the start of the season, me and Archie wrote some predictions for the DIVEBOMB website. So what we're going to do is quickly go through them. So, we'll start off with the champion prediction. Archie, do you remember who you went for?
Yeah, I went for Scott McLaughlin.
You went for Scott McLaughlin.
I think it was probably a year too early. I think he ended 22 very strongly. But I think just as a general thing, I think the expectations were still too high for someone who was only coming into his 3rd year. Yes, he was really impressive, and he was already a front runner and won multiple races last year. But I think there were still inconsistencies that needed to be ironed out. And to his credit, latterly this year, he has ironed out those inconsistencies and probably can mount more of a challenge next year. I think, the expectations were just too high, and I think I kind of fell into that trap and thought, maybe he could mount it, but he was the strongest Penske. He was the top-ranked, Chevrolet driver. So I don't think it was
wasn't horrendous, no.
But not putting Alex Palou just is generally a horrendous prediction, looking at the margin by the end of the year.
Talking of putting Alex Palou, your boy predicted it right in March. I put Alex Palou as the series champion. I didn't expect it to be this dominant, but I will happily take that. 2 good predictions in a row for me, so I'm very proud. Right, let's cast our minds back to May. Indy 500 winner. I put Scott Dixon. You put Alex Palou. So we kind of went for a similar ballpark. They finished in a pretty similar zone. To be fair, you were probably closer. Palou might well have won it if he had not collided with Rinus VeeKay. So it's always hard to predict the Indy 500 winner, but I don't think we embarrassed ourselves on this occasion.
No, I think picking the 500 winner pre-season is kind of just like picking a ball out of a hat, really. I think, obviously we looked at Ganassi's form, and in general they had been performing really well. The 522 was incredibly strong for them. But yeah, Alex Palou took pole, looked like You know, he was really on for something special before the contact with VK, and judging by his pace coming back through the field to fourth, he could well have had the best car that day. And Newgarden took it, and Newgarden fully deserved it. I think just also reading, I was saying I was tempted to go with one of the Ed Carpenter Racing entries. And Rinus VK having shown a knack for running towards the head of the field, which, to be fair, VK did again. Daly didn't quite get to the front, but VK was also a front row starter. So, yeah, I don't think they were awful predictions.
No. Rookie of the year. It's time for you to get on right. You put Armstrong. I put Rob. I think my basis was the oval. The Armstrong sitting out of the ovals would be too significant for him to catch up with. I think the DCR package was not as strong as it has been in previous years, particularly when Grosjean was there, for example. And I really didn't expect Canapine to be the one closest to Armstrong of all of them. I think maybe in hindsight, Armstrong and the Ganassi was always going to be the more favourable option. But, you know, the things you could do for hindsight. But you put Armstrong, so credit to you.
Yeah, I said he would narrowly finish ahead of Rob. I think similar to you, I think I was looking at what Malukas did last year for Coyne and thinking, yeah, that was impressive. Rob was obviously the better of the two graduates from Indy Lights, you know, in terms of that 22 season in Lights, and that proved to be the case actually across the season. He beat Peterson, but yeah, it was really the other two who had the measure of the two guys with American experience. And, you know, Armstrong, I think he had the advantage of driving for Ganassi, and I generally just think he probably was the best of the rookie crop anyway in terms of talent level. And again, he kind of went some way to proving that results in F2 aren't the most indicative, really.
No.
But yeah, I think he did a really good job, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do now with this multi-year deal.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get back onto more favourable terms for me. We'll say it's 2-1 to you so far. Your predictions have been closer. Most improved, I put Carl Kirkwood. You went for Jack Harvey. I think you've touched on Harvey. For your sake, I won't say too much unless you want to say anything.
I was just going to say I'm not going to speak, but yeah, my rationale was that it couldn't get much worse, but you know, clearly it did somehow get worse. Poor Jack Harvey.
I went for Carl Kirkwood, who I think arguably maybe was the most improved. I think maybe you put Lundgaard up there as well, but I'm not really sure who else you'd put in that bracket.
Yeah, Kirkwood was a great shout, to be fair. I mean, obviously there was improvement was going to be natural, making the step up to Andretti, but he still had to get used to it, and really from the very start of the season hit the form that we knew his peak level could be, and he reached that peak performance a couple of times, obviously taking the pair of wins. But yeah, I think that's a great prediction, to be honest.
Yeah, I think maybe alongside Lundgaard, the most improved. So I'm happy with that shout. 2 victories. I don't know what I put. And even just on his consistency, he didn't make as many incidents as we saw make last year. So I'm pretty happy with that one. Right. Flop of the year. You went for Will Power. I went for Pato Award. Just for context, I used to have this terrible thing where I'd instantly curse an IndyCar driver, whatever I said about them. So obviously, wishing Awards do well, I put him as the flop of the season. I think Awards year is so hard to judge. I'll speak to more about it next week, but I think it was just disappointing he didn't get a win somewhere, but I think Will Power's probably closer to being a flop than the award was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really like the term flop. I think, as we've spoken on here, maybe disappointment's more apt. We don't need to delve into the off-track struggles for Power again. I think my rationale really was that there was such a big gap between his 2 championships coming, 8 years later than his first in 2014. So it always looked to me unlikely that he would retain and take his 3rd championship. But yeah, it wasn't the best season for Will Power. Obviously, mitigating factors there. Looking forward to seeing how he can bounce back next year, really.
Yep. Now, time for another one of your horrendous predictions. Connor Daly is the surprise of the year.
I mean,
He was a surprise, so don't get me wrong, just not for the right reasons.
yeah, I mean, if I took away the explanation, then I would I'd be in business, to be honest, because it was a real surprise, and it was as we've spoken about on here a lot, and don't really need to speak any more about. It was a pretty poor decision in my eyes. Maybe Hunter A's leadership would be helpful in the longer term, but it looks unjust getting rid of Daly, and it was certainly a surprise that they did it when they did. It came from nowhere. But yeah, my rationale was that he might grab a lucky win in a Nashville style race, or have a really strong Iowa or something, and something happens to Newgarden. But yeah, don't really need to say much more about that.
I went for Rossi, who was pretty unspectacular. I mean, I don't really know what I was thinking, because Rossi never really... I think Rossi was kind of at the level people expected him to perform, maybe slightly better than Rosenqvist, but not quite an award. I just had a feeling maybe Rossi would be slightly closer to an award than we thought he would be, but I kind of think he matched expectations this year, so I don't think he was a surprise in either a good way or a bad way. He was just where we expected him to be, really. So there we go. Some good predictions, some not so good predictions. We'll see how we do next year. Fairly mixed bag. I mean, Archie, you pulled it out of the bag in mid-season, I think. Maybe I was slightly stronger at the start of the year, but we'll see what next season brings. So we're actually recording this podcast slightly later than we usually do, which has actually worked to an advantage this week, just because there's been a bit of news surrounding Kiffin Simpson, who will be driving next year for Ganassi in a kind of move which none of us saw coming. It was clear he's eventually going to end up with Ganassi, but we just didn't expect it to be next year.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see the rationale behind this, because it kind of did seem that another year in Indy next would kind of just be the logical path for him, really. But yeah, obviously they see that, having had a couple of years now in Indy next, Indy Lights, maybe now is the time that he'll benefit more from continuing his development in IndyCar. I mean, he is a extraordinarily young driver. I think it speaks a lot about how highly rated he is that Ganassi have him on their books, and they clearly have faith that he could really prove to be something special for them in years to come. But yeah, I think another year in Indy next could have benefited him, really. He's only taken 2 podiums over his couple of years, both coming this year, to be fair. I think he's kind of shown improvement. He's a driver that's already got a lot of experience. He's been racing in sort of IMSA, European Le Mans, Asian Le Mans, I think, as well. So he has experience in a wide variety of series. Certainly for a 19-year-old, he's got an impressive... But yeah, there's clearly a lot of potential there, but I feel like it might take a year or two for that potential to even really start to be shown. I think there could be a tough season ahead, especially considering this is going to be a completely new entry, a new car for Ganassi, and there will be teething problems. If anyone can pull it off, it is probably them. But when you look at, Penske benefited from dropping down to 3 cars, and Andretti might well follow that model. Is it really the best decision for Ganassi to expand? I know Simpson obviously has a lot of backing, and that money could be really beneficial for the team. I think the Ridgeline Lubricants actually sponsored Armstrong. That was related to Simpson. Is it his dad's company?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
So there's already clear involvement and investment being put in even before Simpson drives to the team. But yeah, he was always going to step up at some point, and I guess they kind of feel like they may as well just continue his development in IndyCar. And yeah, it's hard to tell how it'll go, because it can be disruptive adding that extra car, but maybe in the long run it'll pay dividends.
I mean, do you remember a couple of months ago we were having a major discussion, should Ganassi drop down to 3? And now they're expanding to 5. So their season has really taken a turn looking forward to next year. I think maybe a development year would be good, but I guess the other point is from Simpson, he's got these experiences racing LMP2s and pretty competitively, to be fair to him. I think he's shown flashes of excellence in Indy next. He obviously got pole and, as you said, the 2 podiums, as well as 2 further top 5 finishes. It's one which, as I said, we could always see it coming, whether that was going to be next year, or whether that was going to be 25. It was always going to be a move which was going to happen. I think expectations of him are fairly low, but that's, if anything, only plays into his advantage because he can always outperform those expectations, much like people like David Malukas did. It will be interesting to see how Ganassi operate with 5 cars, but we will see what happens on that front. I don't have the hugest expectations, but I wish the best of luck to Kevin Simpson, and I doubt he's going to be at the level of any of his teammates, but only time will tell.
I think the thing that concerns me the most is just the lack of consistency he's got in Indy Next, Indy Lights over the 2 years. Yeah, he's got these a couple of podiums, the occasional headline, but you kind of want to step up when you have gained consistency. Just look at what Lundqvist did when he came up as champion. Simpson's, I think his championship position is kind of skewed a little bit by the fact he's missed races for his other commitments, but 9th and 10th in the championship is fairly unremarkable, really. His biggest achievement is probably the class win at Sebring, actually in a car with Scott McLaughlin. They got 3rd overall in that, that's quite an achievement, and Simpson was a big part of that. I can't remember whether it was Sebring or Daytona, but I think he did actually spin the car and they ended up in the wall. But I think it was Sebring, but it was just such a chaotic race, and the end was so chaotic that they managed to snatch that overall podium class win. So yeah, he's got experience, and I guess time will tell. But it's a good point you make about maybe not that much expectation, and that could indeed work to his advantage.
I just don't. What is it? We're going up to 5. I feel like I don't. Maybe it would be him, but I just feel like surely not everyone is going to do that great if it's going up to 5. And also, if you are adding another car, wouldn't you want to add someone who has been performing like really well? You said that he said he's like a couple of things, but surely you'd want someone that like for sure that are gonna be able to compete and gonna be able to compete to the level that you already are.
Yeah, I mean, Ganassi have taken risks before. They put Jimmy Johnson in the car a couple of years ago, and that didn't work out for a multitude of reasons. I think Simpson's always been one of their proteges, and it would be nice for them to show progression of the proteges into IndyCar, much like Ed Carpenter trying to do with Josh Pearson, who's kind of rumoured to be in the seat next year, or 25, much like Penske, I guess, are trying to do with Miles Rowe. I think it's a good look on them, and it's just going to be a lot on how Simpson performs. But Ganassi has been known for taking risks before, and we'll see how it pans out. But I think it is a surprise. I think out of the rookies we've got so far, it might be Blomqvist, but I don't think it'll be on the level of Blomqvist. So we'll see. Right, so that's all we've got time for. A nice little look back at the season, as well as reviewing the bad and the great for our predictions, as well as a little look into the drive market next season. As we said at the start, next week we're going to be focusing more on the drivers individually, so we'll be tracking through all the driver seasons, looking at their results and kind of giving them a little bit of a rating. So next week we'll start off with the lower half of the standings and then progress to the top half of the week after. That was going to be split over 2 episodes and just a more in-depth season review. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.